Hello, friends. Welcome back to Honoring the Journey. This is your host, Leslie Neese, and I am here today with Mike Maeshiro. Is that right? Did I pronounce that right?
You did. You pronounced it right. I'm impressed.
Yeah. Well, you know what? A funny story, Mike. I was raised in Japan. So that's another thing we can talk about. Yeah.
I had no idea.
私の名前はレスリーです。
Oh, so yeah. Yes.
Anyway, so yeah, I digress. Anyway, Mike is here. I pronounced his name right because I was raised in Japan. He's a former pastor. He is the founder of the NUMA Foundation, which is they help people like queer people recover from some of the religious trauma and abuse maybe that they have suffered. They've got coaching and all kinds of great programs to help people. And he also has a Substack called God Made Me Gay that he updates every week. And I just talked to him about it before I pushed record. And he said, "Oh, yeah, we're hoping it'll be a book one day." So, yes, that sounds fun. He's also on Instagram and all the grams and books and all that. So you can find him there if you're looking for some encouragement. But Mike, I am so excited to welcome you to Honoring the Journey.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I'm very excited for this interview, Leslie. My goodness. You're a host, I can tell.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I they taught me right in Christian radio, you know?
Yeah.
We
Very.
talk about different things now, but we still talk. Yeah. Um, so Mike, as we get started, let's get to know you just sort of on a personal level. And one thing that people have a hard time doing is, sharing something that they're proud of. Like a lot of people don't like to talk about themselves, but I'm going to ask you, what is one thing that you've accomplished in your life that you're like really freaking proud of?
Man, my first immediate obvious answer to this, and it's a little cliche given, my story and all this, but and also very apropos for this space.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
one of the things I'm most proud of in my entire life is finding the guts to walk away from evangelicalism.
Hmm.
Because it wasn't just my worldview and like deep theological persuasion. That's true. And that's significant in and of itself, but it was also my community. It was my career. It was like my upward mobility, it was my financial security. It was all these things in my life. Um, and I finally got to a point in my journey where I was able to choose my humanity and my well-being over, um, fitting in and belonging to a harmful system.
Yeah.
And that was it took me decades to make that decision. And I was conscious of what I was doing for a long time and just continued to gaslight myself and convince myself that, staying was the right choice or whatever was God
Right.
honoring. So finally being able to do that took a lot of guts. It took work. It was not easy. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I'm really proud of having pulled that off.
Well, I'm proud of you too. And I want to say that is a beautiful answer. I know it might be cliche or whatever, but I don't think people understand the guts that it takes to pull that trigger. I mean, because a couple of other things that I'm sure your faith tradition did for you, it was your identity and it was your purpose.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I mean, literally letting go of all of that at one time is one of the scariest, most frightening, most terrifying, and most freeing things I've ever done too.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah, good for
exactly.
you.
Thank
So
you.
let's talk about that, Mike, if you don't mind. You grew up, I believe, in a Christian home. Am I right? What
Yeah,
was
yeah.
that
I
like?
was I was 4 when my parents took me to a Baptist Sunday school for the first time, and I was told that I would go to hell forever
Yeah,
if
I
I
know, a
didn't.
little inappropriate now that you look back.
Right, yeah, I got to learn what crucifixion was that morning, and I was like, "What?" Like, they're describing that they put the nails through Jesus' wrists, not his hands, because he would rip his arms with his hands would tear
At
off the cross.
4?
At 4, and I'm like, "What?" So, yeah, I think back to that, I'm like, "What were they thinking? This is unethical." Anyway, so I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior at 4.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
that morning. And then I immediately got put in private school, and went to private Christian school for years and had to memorize passages of the Bible for a grade. And, our teachers had paddles and we would get spanked and it was terrifying. And anyway, so
Where
I,
was this, Mike? Where
this,
where were you?
this was on Guam.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So
Okay.
missionaries came and founded, some churches and schools in Guam
Yeah.
to colonize the island. And that's the
Nice.
Christianity I was introduced. It was a fundamental Baptist denomination. So
Okay.
very
Yeah. Oh,
conservative.
wow. Very conservative. Yeah. Okay.
Very strict, yeah. But like a good son slash follower of Jesus, I fully bought into everything and was like the poster child for evangelicalism. I was like I was a solid believer,
Hmm.
And by the time I was 10 years old, I consciously recognized that I was what we had all been taught was like one of the worst kinds of humans you could be. I realized in the
Oh no,
bathroom
were you gay?
I was gay. Oh God, that
Wow.
oh, that's what I am. And I didn't want to know that. And one day, just like suddenly, I could not escape or avoid it anymore.
Oh,
And
that's
so I
so
got,
hard.
yeah, it was horrifying. It was like one of the worst things I could have discovered about myself. And so I went hard into the closet and just knew I would never be able to tell anybody this. And yeah, I remember thinking, like, I guess my brightest future I can imagine is like forcing myself to marry a woman and somehow convincing her that that I'm into it and like just pretending for. And I was like, can I do that or do I just stay single for the rest of my life? The idea of being with a guy did not even enter my mind. I could not even.
Oh wow.
So like the future was not something I was looking forward to. Anyway, fast forward. Um, it got kind of dark. By the time I was in middle school, I didn't want to be alive anymore. Like just when your vision of the future just doesn't look like something you want to be part of or that includes you, like it doesn't really feel compelling to want to move toward it,
Had you
Um,
talked to anybody at this point about it, or were you just
Oh,
keeping?
I could
No.
not, Leslie, I would have lost everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so it was like a very dark, isolated experience. I think part of the reason it was so painful was because of how lonely I felt. I just felt like I didn't have anybody in my life who could understand or who would love me. And so thankfully I got through that. And I made some pretty intense commitments to myself and to Jesus, that got me off the bathroom floor that night and helped carry me through. But anyway, I ended up going into ministry and, um I think I was 19 when I had my first radical experience of who I understood God to be, and they were so different than what I was expecting, than what I'd learned from the Bible. Like this God that and I don't to this day, again, like just acknowledging the deconstruction journey for everybody, I have no interest in convincing anybody of who or what God is. I don't
No.
know.
Mm-mm.
Um, but in
Yeah,
my
that disappears in deconstruction because you're like,
yeah,
wait, who am I to say? Nobody should know. We're all just
right.
kind of hoping and guessing and
There's like this humility thing that shows up that we all can learn how to like make space for in our process and the way we communicate with other people and how we
yes,
values, it's wild.
it's crazy
Um,
that humility. Yeah.
and so anyway, whoever I understood God to be, like I was having a visceral, like radical
Mhm.
experience, of the spiritual variety. And they were so much more gracious and kind and humble and loving and accepting, than I had ever conceived of. And it like ruined me. I was like a sobbing mess in this
Tell
church
me what
service.
that looked like. Where were you? What happened? What was
Oh,
said?
listen,
Holy
this is what
crap.
I had to like think back multiple times in my life to try and figure out how did this happen, like, because it ended up happening like 8 to 9 times in my life. I had like these
Mm.
radical moments. The first one, I was at church. I was at adult Sunday school. This is a preceding event. There was a girl in my adult Sunday school class who I was convinced was a lesbian. And she confessed that she, struggled with same sex attraction in her past, but God had healed her and now she was straight and whatever. But they were asking for testimonies that morning of just good things God had done that week. And she shared that there was this movie coming out called Tip of the Spear, End of the Spear. It's a Jim
End of the
Elliott.
spear. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh
And the
yeah.
actor who played the main role in that film is gay. And he came out to the production team during the filming of the movie and they gathered together and prayed and they felt like God wanted him to play the role. And that was her
Why
test,
would God want him to do that?
right? Yeah.
Crazy, Mike.
I know. And she shared that. It was so awkward. Like nobody said anything. It was just dead quiet in the room. And I was like, I want to not be here. What is happening? Um, and I didn't know, I wasn't conscious of it at the time, but in hindsight, I realized that like that's the first time in my life I had ever heard any hint of a possibility that God would be gracious and kind and loving toward a gay person. I had never heard that in my life. I had only ever heard abomination, will not inherit the kingdom, perverted, whatever.
Yeah.
And so fast forward like an hour later, I'm in the adult church service. We're singing the same worship songs we sing every Sunday. But for whatever reason, this time I was different and I could not escape the presence and the ardent focus and love and attention of God. And I just started sobbing. I was like,
Oh.
whoa, we don't get it. Like we don't even know who this person is. They are better than we think. And I didn't know how to articulate what was happening at the time. I don't even know if I conceived of it as well at the time, right? I can talk about it now in hindsight because it's been years, but I was a wreck. And then 8 months later, it happened again at I was at a Friday night, like young adults group, but it blew up. It was like this huge young adults group that was being hosted in Portland, Oregon. Very churchy. And I, again, like had this moment where the pastor was preaching about how this leper fell on his knees before Jesus and said, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And I apologize to everybody that I'm quoting scripture right now, but this is like just part of how
Oh,
this
I
happened.
yeah, I do it all the time, but I also help people see, like, it could mean this or it could mean this. Like,
Yeah.
let's think. Like,
Yeah.
can we, I don't know, critically think our way through scripture? Do you think? Maybe.
Whoa.
I know. What is that? That's that new age.
Yeah, so he's preaching about how this leper falls on his knees and says, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean, right? To Jesus. And Jesus says, I'm willing, be cleansed. And it says he's immediately healed of his leprosy. And the pastor stops reading the Bible and starts preaching about how the Holy Spirit was in the room and was there to heal us. And this was not a charismatic church. So I was like really surprised at what he was saying. I'd never heard a preacher say something like this before. But he was just like talking about how God was there, and it didn't matter how long, whatever your affliction was or whatever, like God would heal us. And I was like, what? And something happened to me like on a physiological level, and I became convinced in that moment. I didn't mean to, it just was happening to me. I was like, my life's about to change. I knew something pivotal was about to happen. So I got my communion cup and my cracker, got to my chair, I got on my knees like that leper, and I said, and you have to realize up to this point in my life, I had one continuous prayer that I
Oh, of
repeated all
course
the
you
time,
did.
right?
Yeah.
Like, God, please make me straight, right? Help me not be gay. Help me to like girls. Help me to stop liking boys or whatever. So I got on my knees like that leper and I said, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And then I fell away from my body. And I don't usually have experiences like this, but like I went down fast into this dark, isolated, solitary place. Earth was far away and like long time ago over there somewhere, right?
Wow.
And in that quiet, I have this deep sense of this presence. And they said to me, I would translate it into English, but it was like in the spirit knowing, right? They were like, Mike, you've only ever told me what to do with this in your life. And I got confronted in that moment. I was like, oh, that's true. I've just constantly been commanding God on what to do about my sexuality. And so I got to repent, I think was the word we would use, right? And I start crying already because it just, in that place, it just felt so inappropriate to be telling God what to do or how they're supposed to be loving me or leading me or whatever. So I'm like already this like puddle. And then I see this in my mind's eye in this dark place, this giant hand comes over my left shoulder and they're like, and you're right, on the one hand, I can change you. I can make you different. You can leave this building a different person. The world will be different to you. But then and I could tell the hand, there's like, this is the thing I've wanted my whole life. It's right there. And then this giant right hand came over my other shoulder and they said, but on the other hand, I want this to remain. And I was like, what? Because I knew God wasn't allowed to tell me that they wanted me to be gay. Like, that's not biblical. Like, they can't say that.
Right.
But there was no part of me that was doubting or like that had any ability to defend myself against this person. They're like, I want this to remain. And I'm like, what? And then they're waiting for a response from me. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to respond to God. What am I going to tell him? And so as I processed through this, my heart overflowed. And with my whole being, I said, I want what you want from me more than what I want. So if you want this to remain a little longer, so do I. And then I was back in my body. Tears were streaming down my face. The lights were on. People were talking. The service was over. And I was like, what? It was so surreal that I was like, did that just happen? Like, am I losing my mind? Like, what? And I did a quick scan just to see, like, did God make me straight? And I'm checking out the girls around.
Am I feeling it?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to avoid all the hot guys in the room. Like, oh God, nothing changed except for I was a different person. Like for the first time in my life, I knew beyond anything anyone could tell me or preach to me or prove to me that God saw me in my entirety and wanted me the way I was. And that changed my life. And that made me feel so accepted and safe with God. However, ironically, like I was
Not with these
also,
people.
yeah, unsafe with Christians, with the
Yes.
Bible, with pastors. Like I had this juxtaposition of like, God loves me and embraces me and wants me to be the way I am. No one else whom I respect and appreciate and like feel safe with agrees with that. And I can't tell them any of this. And so I had this huge split. And then fast forward for the next 16 years, I would have a few more experiences like this, where God would continuously be affirming me as a gay man. And I would feel so deeply emotional and moved and repentant, if you will, but unable to actually do anything about it, let alone tell people what I'm experiencing from the divine in these spaces in my soul. And then
Were you a pastor at this point or
No, this was
yet?
before I ever even went into ministry. This is like, I was like
So
19,
you went
20.
into ministry with this knowledge.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All
Totally.
right.
And part of the
All right, Mike. I see you.
And part of the reason I even went on the pilgrimage that I did that landed me at Bethel Church in Redding, California, was because of these intense, profound, beautiful experiences I was having. I was like, there is more to God or Christianity or spirituality or whatever than my Baptist church knows to tell me. The Bible is speaking about things that they don't have any, so I'm like, what is this? Is this real? Is this true? And so I went on this journey to try and find answers. And then I ended up at a very charismatic church in Redding,
Yeah.
California.
To say.
Which
So
was
tell me what you did at Bethel. What was your role?
Well, so I did first and second year in their ministry school. I got kicked out of school on the last day because somebody outed me. I like came out to a friend in first year, and then by the end of second year, she told some pastors about me because she felt like I wasn't seeking my healing enough or wasn't being aggressive enough about trying to become straight. And so they kicked me out of school. It was traumatizing.
Yeah.
And like it was a dark period of my life. And then like I had some other friends who came around me who were like, what happened? And I was so ashamed. I didn't want to tell anybody why I got kicked out, right? It was humiliating. I was kind of being forced to out myself to people. But I did. I chose to be honest with some friends, and they're like, you need to talk to these leaders. Like something's wrong. Like you should not have been kicked out. And so I went back and they apologized and cleaned it up and acknowledged there was an error here, which was amazing because I would find out later for the
Wow.
rest of my time at Bethel that didn't really ever again.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I got like reinstated, if you will, and then I got hired on staff there, and I started working in the events department, helping manage and facilitate the conferences at Bethel, which that was like a big deal at Bethel. Like we had conferences all the time.
Can I ask you a question? Did
Yeah.
they ask you to not act on your homosexuality, or were there any stipulations, or was this like, come as you are? Let's
Well, that's
let
good.
you.
Yeah, that when I got kicked out, they put me on a purity plan, and so I did everything they asked me to do. I
I'm
went to
sorry.
men's. No, it's funny.
I'm
You're
so
right. It's
mean. I'm so mean. I was like, no, you did not just say that. Okay. I'm sorry.
to put me on a purity plan. And so I had all these hoops to jump through to prove that I was sexually pure and straight or whatever. So I went to the men's sexual purity group. It was like a sexual addicts anonymous kind of space.
Addicts?
Yeah,
Wait,
yeah, yeah.
you hadn't even had sex at this point, right?
No. Listen, I
Oh,
wasn't
good
even like looking
Lord.
at porn or even masturbating at this point in my life. Like that
But
wasn't
you
even-
had to go to that because of
because I was
your
attracted to
sexuality.
men. So clearly
Oh,
I had like an evil spirit or I
my
was sexually
word.
perverse, or whatever.
Okay.
It was so awkward because there were guys in we all have small groups, right? And there were a bunch of guys
Mhm.
there, and they're supposed to get as honest as they've ever been with anybody in these spaces and like gut themselves and become incredibly vulnerable and just confess
Yeah.
all these like shameful, horrible things they fantasize about or are doing or whatever. And so I'm sitting here in this circle listening to these guys saying things I had to like Google. What are they talking about? What does that even mean? What are you doing? I was so shocked. Like repeatedly, I just continued to be like appalled at the things these guys were doing and saying and repeatedly. And, and I'm like, what am I doing here?
You were not in the right place.
I
That's
was not in the right place.
crazy.
And then also for some reason, these guys like loved to take their clothes off during the game portion of the night and would like constantly be like shirtless or in their underwear. And I'm like, why are they sending gay men here? This doesn't make any sense. Well, weird.
Like,
And it was
like
just
putting meat in front of you. Like,
right.
don't look at it. Don't do it.
And I had to like kind of figure out like, oh, they don't actually know what they're doing. Like these people
Oh,
don't
wow.
understand what it means to be gay. This is so
Yeah.
awkward. And I did, several sessions of conversion therapy with multiple different counselors while I was there, which, that took a while to recover from. It was some pretty
I was
horrific
gonna
stuff.
say, how was that for you?
It
That's
was
gotta be-
awful. God, like, and I didn't notice at the time. At the time, you think this is like so helpful and you're so thankful these people are taking the time to invest in you individually. And, I was so thankful for these like high up counselors and sozo people like pouring into my life and choosing to get on my team and help me heal. So at the time, it didn't feel problematic. But when I started recovering from all this stuff and deconstructing and unpacking what happened, there were a lot of tears and there was a lot of like trauma that just came up and things that I had to like undo and repair about things I learned about myself and about sexuality and about, anyway, yeah, it was a lot of really weird, specific, deeply problematic and toxic ideas around sexuality and intimacy and God. And I get into details with some of this stuff in my Substack and the God Made Me Gay, the books that I'm putting out.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was a lot to have to recover from. But anyway, I went through all this and like everyone who had any kind of authority over me in these processes kept giving me clean bills. Like, check, you're good. There's nothing else for you to do. You're good. You're good. I kept passing all of the tests. And yet nothing about my attractions was budging in the slightest. I was still just deeply repressed. I just got really good at repressing myself, and that's what they were like, "That'll work. That's fine. We'll accept that,"
That's what
right?
we do here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, seriously. And so when I got hired, I was so repressed that I passed as a straight person. I was
Wow.
like a holy, pure man of God, basically, right? That was
Yeah.
really easy to come across because like I wasn't falling into sin or lusting after women. So anyway, I got hired on staff and worked there for years. And then incrementally, I just kept being asked to do other things and kept being given more opportunity and more privilege and more influence and more platform. And so I started leading mission trips for the school that I got kicked out of. And I started like taking interns and mentoring them. And I started teaching in the school that kicked me out. And everything that, and then I
Wow.
also got like one of the head guys who, these guys are like celebrity Christians. You know what I mean? Like they've got huge platforms. And one of them started posting the stuff I was writing on Instagram. I was like writing my thoughts and processing through my own version of spirituality and putting those thoughts out on the internet. And then they started sharing my stuff. And so my following on Instagram started blowing up at that time, which was so cool. Right. And then I started like being on the video announcements. And again, like Bethel was huge. So they've got this whole streaming subscription and people from all over the world are watching their services and their courses and whatever. And so my face is getting on there and I'm telling them what's happening in the week and whatever. And so I just started becoming a lot more noticeable and like public, and my class started gaining intense notoriety. And like the students, it became like one of the number one most attended classes in the whole school. And so I'm starting to become really like quote unquote successful in the things that I'm doing. I started flying around the world and teaching and like speaking at conferences and churches. And it was bizarre. I was like, how is this happening? I mean, I'm loving it. This is my dream, right? But I'm also so deeply closeted. And so I had to constantly just like dump repression on my inner person, right? To keep him out of the picture so I could keep performing this successful caricature
So
for,
you were rewarded for living into your ego and not
yeah.
your true self.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The things I was saying were like cutting edge in that
Of
space
course.
and pushing boundaries, but it was all predicated on me pretending to be straight, right? And
Right.
so,
Okay, like so let's get real. Let's be human here for a second. Like I want you to tell me like what did that feel like to know like living duality. You know what I mean? Like that is something I think a lot of Christians do.
yeah.
People who know like, okay, I know what I'm like, but nobody else needs to know, you know. What was that like for you? And how did that, I guess, manifest in your actions and in how you treated other people?
Oh, I mean, what was it like? The answer I would say is psychologically tormenting. It was like psychological torment. I just was a fractured person, and then just spending so much energy animating this
Mhm.
person and like constantly managing other people's perceptions of me and their expectations. I had people constantly coming to me for pastoral counseling or coaching who are processing their own like intimacy issues and like with their spouse or their girlfriend, they keep slipping up. And I'm like, I found myself like having difficulty being empathetic or having compassion for them,
I
not
wondered about that.
realizing that it's because absolutely this is not an experience in my life I even get to have. Why is this so difficult for you? Right? Like there's this weird delusional, like this shouldn't be this hard kind of attitude was coming up. And I
Well,
look,
and I also wonder, like, does it make you go, everybody's lying. Everybody's living a lie.
oh,
Is this what we're doing? Are we just not talking about it?
good question. That's a good question. I don't know if you know, I wish I could say yes. There are still people in our space that I was like, no, they're legit. They're real. They're
They get
authentic.
it.
It's actually there.
Wow. Well, they
No,
did
I
a
don't.
good job then.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. I don't think that now, but at the
Yeah, yeah,
time,
yeah.
like I could, Leslie, I'm telling you like what I felt like or what I was experiencing
In
in
that moment.
hindsight. If you would have
Yeah.
asked me at the time, I could not have told you any of this. And not because I
Right.
was lying to you. It was not available to me. I had buried it so deep I didn't think about it.
Mhm.
Right. It just
Yep.
wasn't part of my process. But I did
Wow.
notice after a while there was this pattern where every like 9 months or so, I would have like about a week where I would fall into this weird, lusty black hole where I would feel inflamed, like as a very sexual, very gay, horny individual. And I remember like a few times that happening, me having to force myself to imagine, could I marry a man? Like, because like it became so unbearable. I could not keep being in the position I was in and playing the game I was playing and move forward, it felt like a trap. It felt like tasteless, and I felt deeply troubled. And the only way out felt like I had to marry a man, but I couldn't, right? So it was like these weird little like affairs with myself where I would simply just like allow myself to imagine. And then at the end of the week, I would like conclude, no, I'm actually not gay because I don't want to marry a man. Because if I were to marry a man, all these horrible things would happen in my life. And if I
And
don't
you
marry,
lose everything.
yeah, look what I get to keep and look what I get to be and what I get to do and look what I get to give to the kingdom. Like, and so as I weighed these out, I'm like, no, I don't want to marry a man. That sounds like a horrible idea. And that had nothing to do with my orientation or my attractions. It had everything to do with maintaining all these things that I built, you know? And so then I convinced myself, like, I think I ethically can say that I'm not gay because I actually don't want to marry a man. And so I convinced myself that I was not gay, right?
Yeah.
I don't condone this for anybody. I'm not thinking this is a good idea, but that's like where I was at the time. And
No, yeah.
it's like hard to imagine. I like to get back into that space and be like, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Cause it feels like I'm talking about somebody else, you know, like but that's, I mean, that's the best I could come up with. And
Right.
so the more my platform grew and the more followers I gained and the more people came to my conferences and whatever, the more lonely I just continued to feel. But let's say again, like I wasn't consciously lonely. I continued to like, there was like this visceral pain that I would mask with other, just like distracting myself with other things. So I built businesses for fun and I like wrote for fun and I preached for fun and I was making a lot of money and like doing really well and just getting further and further away from my own experience, you know? And then, you know, things change.
Things changed. Ooh, okay. Well, what happened? How did that happen? Because it sounds like you were on the money train when it came to Christianity. You were like on the like Christian celebrity, like whoop, whoop, like let's go. And
Ah,
that's a big train, and that's a hard train to get off of.
yeah, totally. It was, and it had quite the momentum. It was like
Oh, absolutely.
bulleting down.
Yeah.
So I remember I went on a business trip to Florida and I was in a hotel room by myself. And one of those weeks that I was telling you about happened that weekend. I like was so gay. And I was like, I can't stay in this hotel room by myself. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I went on a walk. And this is me managing my sexual urges, right? And like, I just prayed for a couple of hours and I was like, God, at that time, I was like, it's been 14 years since you told me you wanted this to stay in my life. What are we doing? I'm still single. I'm a very well-known Christian person. As a man, I'm not supposed to be single. Like something's wrong with me, right? Everyone's wondering, why am I still single at this age, right? What are you doing? You're just going to leave me here and let me be ashamed? Like, what, are we going to heal me anytime soon? Like, what are we doing? And, you know, I got no response. I got no relief. I just was tired after a while and went to bed. Uh, but I came home and I broke up with my girl. I was dating a girl at the time. I had been convinced myself I should date this person. I'd convinced myself I was attracted to her. And the thing is, I think I was attracted to her in some, like her energy, like
I'm
relate,
sure. Yeah.
but I was not in any way romantically or physically attracted to her. And not because she wasn't attractive. It didn't work. It wasn't there. And so we dated for 7 months and I was trying to like get her to slow down in her intimacy toward me. She kept like upping the stakes. Naturally, of course, you're going to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, can you like let me lead? I'm the man in this relationship. Can you let me, you know, and I just think about that now, but she like hurt me and was trying to like get on board. And then at one point we were making like dinner in my kitchen and she told me she loved me. And I was like, oh shit. Like,
Mm-mm.
what am I supposed to do? This person's in love with me. Oh God. Like, and so like, ironically, this is so awkward and hilarious in hindsight, but like 2 weeks later, I broke up with her. And it's not bad because I'm like, I can't let her keep going down this road and it only intensifies because this like attraction stuff doesn't just sit there benign. It grows, right? It multiplies.
Right.
And so I'm watching this woman fall in love with me and I am not feeling any more attracted to her than I thought I was when we started dating. And I just got to the point where I was like, I can't do this in good conscience. Like, this isn't fair to her. So I broke up with her. And I told her before we started dating, like, hey, just so you know, I've struggled with being attracted to men in the past. I've worked through it. It's not a problem anymore, right? So she thought it was dealt with and fine and we're good. Anyway, so I broke up with her and then it was February 1st, 2020. So just before social distancing and the COVID
Mm-hmm.
pandemic broke out. I watched Miss Americana, which is Taylor Swift's like documentary that came out on Netflix that year. It came out like the day before. I watched it by myself in my living room. And at one point in that movie, she goes hard on advocating for queer people and just like that they deserve human rights and they, like need to be protected and the politicians and whatever. And she was so vehement and passionate. I'd never seen her talk about anything like this before. And something happened in that moment. I felt what I would have at that time called the onset of spiritual conviction. I was like, this girl knows something that I don't. She's on the right side of this and I'm not. Like, I don't know what I'm missing here, but she's right and I'm missing something. And I knew it was about the gay thing, but I wasn't ready to come out or embrace that or anything. So I just like was like bothered and I was like taking note, like that matters. I don't know what to do with that. I'm gonna let it go. If it matters more, it'll represent itself. So I ignored it. And then 2 weeks
Right.
later, I was in my living room pacing and like kind of rage praying because I was having some difficult conversations with leaders at Bethel at this time. That's a whole other story that we don't have time for today, but I was
Right.
really angry about how I was being treated by leaders at Bethel. And so I'm like pacing in my living room, really angry, praying out loud, and I get interrupted. I'm going to get biblical again, everybody. I apologize. I get
Okay.
I get interrupted by that story in Acts. It's in Acts 10 where Peter goes up on the roof and falls into a trance and a sheet comes down from heaven with all these animals that Jewish people were forbidden to eat. And God says, rise, Peter, kill, eat. And Peter says, no, Lord, I've never eaten anything unclean. And God says, don't call anything unclean that I've made clean. This happens 3 times. The sheet goes back in heaven. And then I stop reading. And I'm like, why? Why now? What is this? And I can feel that same feeling I felt with Taylor Swift 2 weeks ago. And it's happening again.
Mm,
Something is
wow.
happening. What is this? And so I'm like, okay, whatever I'm reading right now has something to do with the gay thing. Is God trying to tell me that being gay, maybe at some point it was forbidden, but now it's acceptable? Like, is that what's going on? I'm like, and I don't know enough about this to substantiate that. So I like, and again, I'm also not incentivized to know any better.
Right.
I leave it
Yeah.
alone. We're okay. I don't have to do that. And then 3 weeks later, we're coming to a close, Leslie. 3 weeks later, I'm pacing around not pacing. I'm like going on a walk in the woods behind my neighborhood. We are now full blown like quarantine, right? So I'm walking by myself in the woods and I'm so upset because I'm still trying to figure out what to do with the leaders in my life at Bethel and how I'm being so unjustly treated. And I'm at this point actually yelling out loud because I'm so mad. And then again, I get interrupted by another passage of scripture. This story happens twice in 2 different gospels. So I pull it up in Luke. Jesus rebukes the teachers of the law and he says, you heap rules and requirements on the people without lifting a finger to help them. He goes off by the prophets and their tombs and the hypocrisy of the generation. And he concludes with, you prevent people from entering the kingdom while you yourselves refuse to enter. And in that moment, like Leslie,
Woo.
people ask, what was the moment? That was the moment. It wasn't an isolated moment. There were obviously all these building up moments that had been happening for years, but
Yeah.
there was some momentum, in that real time
Oh,
there.
yeah.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back because all of a sudden it was like whatever last spread of defense I had to stay detached and uninvested in this conflict, and still keep my conscience, like got shattered in that moment. And it stopped being about me and God and my sexuality and loving myself. And it became like, you are also platformed by an institution that is harming people like you, and you're doing nothing about it. In fact, you're actually being benefited from your silence and complicity. It's basically what was coming out of that Jesus,
Wow.
right?
You know what? Can I say something here? This is, to me, it's so interesting, is that the people that use the Bible as a weapon, it's the exact same book that convicted you to
Right.
feel the way that you feel.
Yeah.
So that to me is such a powerful story of, listen, guys, it's not the Bible that's the problem. It's how we look at it. It's how we interpret it. It's what we think it means. But you know what? What if we opened our minds a little bit? What if we opened our eyes a little bit? What if we opened our hearts a little bit and realized that if it's not promoting love, if it's not going in the direction of love, then maybe it's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because it's
Exactly.
biblical doesn't mean it's good.
Oh, I mean, I think the Bible itself says what you just said, right? I think
Yes,
if you're going to honestly
exactly.
interpret what these later church fathers were saying in
Yeah.
the Bible, that ethic is like holds true and forces us to reinterpret how we took everything else that came previous. So totally, that was absolutely happening for me, and it's so ironic, but yeah, the Bible.
It blows my mind. So many deconstruction stories that I hear, because most people, I mean, you probably know this, Mike, because you're in this community pretty good. The like most people who deconstruct were so freaking into it. They were like the super Christians. They were
Right.
the ones who were taking everything seriously, that were reading the Bible all the time. Yeah, crusaders. And they realized this, we're not living it like we say we are. We're not doing what the Bible's saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
totally.
it's important to understand that. Like, it's not that people who are deconstructing are looking, I'm not reading the book of Satan. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I'm reading the Bible.
Right.
And that's what's convicting me, that what I'm thinking and believing and teaching and acting is not from God. That's what's doing it.
Yep.
So anyway,
Yeah.
go
So
ahead.
funny.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Had to intervene on that one. I
Well,
loved it.
I actually want to write that down. It's so good. You're right. Like so many of us who left, we didn't leave because we were looking for an excuse to sin or we wanted an easier
Mm-mm.
way. We left because we were the ones paying attention. We were the
Yes.
most informed about what we were talking about.
Front row Baptists, man. We were
Exactly.
there. We were taking notes.
Right.
We were preaching when the pastor was out of town. We were, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, we we were for real. And I would say the majority of the people I know who've deconstructed get so angry when they hear that thing. And you know what I'm about to say. You were never one of us. It's like, you couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
You just couldn't. I was so into it. I was so 100%.
Right. Right.
It's scary to think that you can be 100% in and you can actually see it different. And that's why people will say that. They don't want to believe that it's possible, because then that means, that might happen to me, and I don't want that to happen to me, because why? Why? Because I'm scared.
Terrified. Yeah.
There's
Fear.
that fear. Hey
Right.
guys,
Yep.
there's a fear of perfect love. Perfect love casts out fear. Why are you afraid? Boom.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yep. Totally. Exactly.
I don't know.
So I'm having this like fallout.
Right.
I'm losing my religion basically, right? If you and that's not true. I was finally being the most honest and vulnerable with the religion I was engaging in, and it was condemning me. I was like, I am standing on the wrong side of this. And all the while, the actual church building of this church that I'm a part of is sitting on the hill above me while I'm going through this like crisis. And then the story of Moses randomly, this is so bizarre because I don't ever think about this part of Moses' story, but when he sees an Egyptian guard like beating on a Hebrew, and then Moses kills that guard, I'm like, that moment is flashing in my head, and I basically have this realization, like, this is exactly what I haven't done. Moses at
Right.
least had the courage and the nobility to stand up for his people, even though it cost him something. I have watched these oppressors beat on my siblings for years now, and I have done nothing. I have not gotten in the way of it. I have not stopped them. I have not, whatever. And I was like so heartbroken. Oh, I could cry just thinking about it right now. Because it wasn't at this point, it wasn't just about me. Like I was a very privileged benefactor, right, of all of this stuff. And there were actual victims who were continuously being harmed by the things that we were preaching and the lines we were holding and the gates we were keeping. And I was part of it. And I was like, I'm a hypocrite. How can I stand in front of anybody again on a stage and preach about Jesus when I'm aware that this is a thing? Like I have been doing this for a long time, and now I don't get to pretend like I don't know any better. That was a game changer for me. And so the response from this pivotal moment in my life was mostly grief. I just started taking inventory of everything I was about to lose. And not like, am I going to lose it? It was like, oh, I'm preemptively having a funeral for all
For
these
everything. Yeah.
in my life, right? Like,
Oh, that is so, so good. Oh, say that again. Wow. Seriously. I
I'm-
love that. It's so true. Like that, you just described the beginning of deconstruction
yeah.
so beautifully.
Yeah, it's this preemptive funeral that you're having with all the important, beautiful, meaningful things in your life that you already are accepting you're losing. You're going to lose all this stuff. And the moment it happens is going to be when you stop pretending, when you stop lying to people, when you start being honest about what you actually believe. What you
Lying
act.
to yourself
Yeah,
and
right.
sitting yourself down. Like it doesn't surprise me, Mike, in previous Mike's defense. Um, you know what I mean? Like I'm imagining that you had no voice, you didn't think, because you had been taught that you were literally evil. Like your being who you were was to be discarded, and you were to be this pretend person. And so, like, it's not that you didn't want to speak up, it's that you really didn't know that you could. I think what you realized, it's kind of like that story about the bird cage where, the bird's in the cage for so long that when the door opens, it doesn't know how to fly out.
Mm.
It's like, no, this is my reality. The outside of this is dangerous. You know what I mean?
Um,
That's what this is kind of bringing up for me.
it's fair. Yeah. I mean, as you say that, I think about all the different conversations I had with leaders in that
Yeah.
space for years. And
You were always
al-
wrong.
yeah,
You were
almost
always
all those
wrong.
meetings, like I got to say whatever I said.
Mhm.
They let me say, and then they told me what I needed to think as we concluded the
Right.
meeting. Like it was always that way, which to me, I
Right.
think back, I'm like, God, how did I do that for so long? This is ridiculous. But when you're in that structure and like
It's all you
submission,
know.
sonship, and like,
Sacrifice.
like when
You're
that's
supposed to be miserable when you're a Christian, right? If you're not, you're doing something
you're
wrong.
doing something wrong. Yeah, yeah.
Ugh.
Okay, so then I was like, oh God, I'm doing this. And I knew I couldn't just like think about it or like even talk about it. I had to like take some action, right? Some steps. I
Mhm.
had to like, inform people. So
Mhm.
I started coming out to some close friends, and they were surprisingly not as upset as I was expecting them to be. They weren't affirming yet or supportive, but they were a lot more considerate than I thought they would be. To my like delight and shock, that was beautiful and so helpful. And so then I started expanding what I was selling, and then it started getting worse, right? The further out I got.
Oh, it
Um,
does. Yeah.
yeah, and then I had a couple of conversations with some leaders there. And I told them as earnestly as I could some of what I've shared with you today here. And they did the thing where they let me say the thing, and then afterward, once I was done, they like told me, I remember verbatim, like the guy at that point who had the most like oversight over me in that environment. I told him all this, and at the end of this, he was like, "Mike, God loves gay people. Gay people go to heaven. Again, whatever. The moment you pursue a romantic relationship with another man, you're not following Jesus anymore." And I was like, "Okay, okay. So you
You're
haven't heard
missing it.
yeah, yeah, you haven't heard anything I'm saying. You're not actually
Yeah.
listening to me. Oh yeah. And that was kind of like the the straw that broke the camel's back for me in terms of trying to stick it out with Bethel. Because at that point I was gonna try and work with leaders if they would at least listen to me. I would at least stick around and represent and embody and like learn and educate as well. Like this process forward, how can we actually become more affirming and celebratory and inclusive of queer people? I don't even have the verbiage that I just used right now. Back then, I couldn't have said. I would have
Yeah.
scrambled for words, right? And then
I know.
there was zero consideration from any leader I actually talked to about any of this. They were all hard and like inconsiderate, and like I became somebody else so quickly in their eyes. It was shocking. I was like, oh, this isn't a
Mm.
relationship. I
Yeah.
was a tool, and now I'm no longer going to be effective for you. So my value is gone.
Woo!
Shock.
Preach
It
right
was
there. That
so
is so real right there, what you
yeah,
said.
yeah. And it's
Yeah,
like
you think you're in a relationship with people until you realize, "Oh, wait, I'm believing something different now, and nobody wants to have anything to do with me.
right,
I'm all of a sudden the evil one." And
right.
it's like, "Wait a minute, I was your best friend last week." You know what I mean? Like, what's happening? I lost so many friends because I said I didn't think Trump was God's chosen. Like, literally, how do you what? What? They're like,
Yeah.
"How can you believe that? You're obviously being deceived by Satan."
Wow.
All right. All right.
Alright.
Well,
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah, and I wish that I could say that I can't relate to what you just said, but yeah, I don't even
I think everybody listening can. You
yeah.
know what I mean? I
That's
really do,
so
sadly.
unfortunately, that's so real. That's such a
Yeah,
common experience. It's wild. Oh, anyway, so
I
then
know.
I started, like, doing a lot of research. I spent 9 months studying queer affirming theology because I wasn't ready to throw the Bible away. I was like, "Oh god, how do I actually follow my convictions and my relationship with the Holy Spirit, and how does this fit into, biblical, you
Well,
know"
because we're thinking you're taught so much in evangelicalism that the core, the foundation of your faith is the Bible.
Yep.
Okay, first of all, can we talk about that for a second? That is idolatry. Okay. We're literally putting our faith in a book. You know what I mean? That is telling us things that men wrote
Right.
for first of all. Okay, maybe they were inspired, but I definitely don't think they were inerrant. They get the inerrant because they hear, "Oh, well, the Bible is God breathed." And it's like, yeah, well, so were we. And we are not inerrant. So please don't give me that. You know what I mean? Right? We just high-fived, guys. It was fun. Like, I don't think I've ever done that on the air. But yeah, it's true. And so I'm just like, oh, anyway, see, I
Yep.
get excited. I
Yeah.
apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh,
Please
let's
keep
we're
going.
just
You're filling me. I love it.
No, you're right. That's so true. So I started doing a lot of research, and I was like continuously shocked at what I was learning. At how many people were out there talking about this. Like so many voices who were speaking to the church, speaking to evangelicals and playing by the evangelical rules and using the Bible to make their claims and disproving that any of the Clopper passages had anything to do with gay people. And I was like, what? And the more I read and the more I studied, the more like the clearer things got, and the more like reason and logic and evidence-based like research was being on the side of the affirming conversation. And I was like, oh my God, we have, at the very least, we have not been honest about this. We have not done our due diligence. We have not actually like brought intellectual integrity to this conversation. We've only done the research insofar as it affirmed what we want to be true. This is not okay. Just on an intellectual level, I was like, this is not okay. And so I started getting a little more emboldened in my attitude. And I was like, you guys want to say these horrible things? You're not even right. Like, you don't even have the proof to back up what you're saying with.
So while you're saying this, if you don't mind, could you give us an example of the way that we have twisted? Because I know people are listening. They're like, well, what does he mean by that? Okay, I agree, but like, tell me what that means. Because there are certain scriptures that say, you know,
Yeah.
homosexuality is horrible. And like, okay, touche. That's exactly what it says. But did it always say that?
Right. Yeah.
What word was it before? You know what I mean? Like, what? Tell us a couple of big ahas, like things that you discovered.
Okay. Let's say rein me in if I get too like out there.
No, do it, please. We're ready.
Well,
We're
well, it's
buckled
one big
in.
one. Sodom and Gomorrah obviously is a big
Yes.
Old Testament reference. People pull from. Literally, the word sodomy is supposed to mean anal sex because of how this passage of the Bible got interpreted in American culture. When you look at the actual story, it says that every man in the city came to Lot's house to rape the angels. Every single dude. Was every single dude in Sodom gay? Like, we know that's not true. Anyway, there's so many things about the narrative itself that is like, this isn't what the author is saying. And then when you look at the 12 to 13 other references of Sodom and Gomorrah later in the Old Testament, and it references the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's inhospitality. It's being unwelcoming to strangers, right? It's like not taking care of the poor. There's all these explicit crimes that Sodom and Gomorrah were guilty of, and sexual immorality is part of it. But the thing that's referenced in Jude is not homosexuality. Again, they don't have a concept for that in the Bible. And so what they're addressing in Jude, when we're referencing Sodom and Gomorrah, is like that these people were lusting after different flesh, right? So talk about like having sex with angels is like the crime and the problem here. So to me, I'm like, whoa, that feels like a very obvious, immediate, like dismissal of using this as justification for condemning queer people. When you look at the 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 1 Timothy 1:10, when you look at when it says like homosexuals, it's in some translations would not inherit the kingdom. These are in lists both times, and the lists are economic and sexually exploitative crimes, right? Like, and so you're putting a kind of person into a list of all these crimes that people are committing that are specifically targeting and preying upon vulnerable people. We know in our, just what we know today, that's not, there's a conflation here. Gay people don't do that. Can gay people do that? Sure. Straight people also can do that. This is not about sexual orientation. And so like when you start pulling
about perversion, there's a difference.
Yeah. And it's like always about a power differential. You are dominating and taking something from someone else.
That sounds like our government right now and the religion. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Listen, we can't even get started on.
I know. We'll be here all day, Mike.
Right. We don't have time for that. But anyways, when you start like referencing, like revisiting the original context of who was writing this and to what audience and for what reason, sexuality is not even a concept in that world. Like they don't even understand sexual orientation. That's not something they even like recognize. Right. And then like women were almost fully formed men. They like didn't quite get there. And so they weren't even like full citizens or people. And so feminine positions in sex was also a degrading thing because you're lowering your status as a man in a patriarchal culture. Like that's what's being addressed and like seen as obscene and offensive in these conversations. It's not about sexual orientation. So when as I kept pulling these things apart, becoming more and more like equipped with actual information, I was like, oh my God, these pastors, these leaders who are standing on these pulpits and preaching these things and defending these things vehemently, I know more than most of them. In 9 months, like they're not actually trying to understand this. Like this is so unfair and not okay. And so I found a mentor. Actually, ironically, the girl that I broke up with, I came out to her later, and then she was like surprisingly supportive at the time. And then she sent me a podcast of all these pastors who were being interviewed on the homosexual conversation. And there was like a range of responses, but several of them were affirming. And one of them was talking about affirming and including queer people within the church in a way that I hadn't heard anybody speak about up to that point. I was shocked. I was like, who is this person? He is on a different level with this
Wow.
conversation. And so I like thankfully got a hold of him. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee. So I like flew out and met with him. And after the first time of sitting across from him at a coffee table, I was with some friends afterward and I sobbed. Like I lost control. Like I couldn't breathe because I was crying so hard because I had literally never in my life sat across from a cishet white man who was a church leader who knew that I was gay and didn't bat an eyelash and did not need me to change. Like I had never experienced that up to that point. And I was physically reacting. It was like so
That's so
bizarre
beautiful.
and
It's so
beautiful and
beautiful.
liberative. Yeah, yeah. It was so healing. And I had no idea how oppressive this scenario had been my whole life. So that was a game changer for me. And I was like, I got to get around this person. So I was like, I'm leaving. I'm getting out of Reading. Obviously, this is not a safe place for me to be. I can't come out and actually have the gay experience of like dating other men and whatever while I'm living in a fishbowl. Cause like I would go places in Reading and people knew who I was and they, so like, I can't do this. So I left and, moved to Nashville, got around him and just continued to like grow and learn. And thankfully had several mentors in my life who helped me process through this massive transition I was going through. And then in 2022, so 3 years ago now, I came out publicly and I came out. I did it on purpose. I was like, I am not going to go quietly into my own private life. Like I can't know this is happening here to so many people and know what I know and have been through what I've been through and say nothing. So I came out and I punched Christianity in the mouth. And I was like, you are vile and what you've done is not okay. And this has to change. And people got so angry. I understand, right? But like
Yeah.
I was zero apologetic about it because I was fully convinced at this point at just an academic level, you guys are wrong. You actually don't know what you're talking about and you are hurting people in your ignorance. This is not okay. But then I was also so aware of all these other gay kids being raised in the same homes I was raised in with the same homophobia and the same heterosexism and the same toxic theology that were also wanting to end their own lives and being sexually repressed and like having all these long lasting traumatic effects. I was like, these people deserve advocacy. They deserve a better way. And they're so arrested by their genuine love for Jesus or, regard for the Bible or whatever. I was like, how are they going to find their way out? I wouldn't have found my way out otherwise, right? Like I wouldn't listen to somebody who's already on the other side of the spectrum. I would not listen to them. They're deceived, whatever, right? But what if I could speak their language? And what if I could like show them that there's actually a crack in the wall. And if you want, you could actually get out and you're still part of whatever. So then I started just getting hard at making content and like shifting my whole team. I made them read a ton of books and we had lots of conversations. And I was like, we are going to support and defend and advocate for queer people. And we are absolutely going to be prioritizing them in our work. And they were like, we're in, let's do it. Doing it ever since.
I love that. This is so amazing and so powerful. And it does take time. And I do think, like you said, you took 9 months to just study. You've also, you took your time in coming out publicly. Like these things take time. You don't have to like all of a sudden wake up and like, boom, be out there and have your social media. You don't even have to be on social media.
Yeah.
Like what would you, and this is a tender thing. And I just want you to imagine little Mike, right? Little Mike, maybe 18 years old, sitting across the table from you now.
Oh.
What would you say to him?
I would cry.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd probably just cry for a while and then like probably give him a hug. And he'd be like, what are you? And then I would tell him, hey, it's going to take a while and it's going to be crazy. It's going to be a lot, but who you are, who you love, how you feel is 100% valid, has always been, and will continue to be that. And eventually one of these days you're going to realize that, and you're going to get to be fully yourself, and you're going to get to experience happiness and safety. And you will have people who love you for who you are, and you won't have to pretend and like pedal for that anymore. And it's worth it. It's going to cost a lot, but it's going to be worth it. So for what it's worth, as you're about to go through everything you're about to go through, I know it's going to take you some time and you're going to need some persuading. You are fully valid and loved exactly the way you are right now. You're not missing anything. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to heal. And I look forward to you getting on the other side. Like, because the thing is, that guy would not listen to me.
You don't know that. Maybe he would have. He might have.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he would.
If you looked similar, he might be. He'd be like, wait a minute, that really might be me. And he might really know something.
You know what? You're right. If I could present to him what I know biblically now,
right,
then I bet he might change his mind.
Yeah, I wonder though, like, I feel like I often think of like, what would I have said to little Leslie, and it's like, she had to go through, there's that mom part of me that just wants to save her and just be like, girl, stop doing this, stop going in that direction. Here's what's going to happen now. Well, but in order to get to where I am now, I had to go through what I went through. I had to feel the feelings. I had to feel the sadness and the deep darkness. And I had to do all of that. It's because then now I know what it feels like to have light. Now I know what it feels like to be able to truly love somebody for who they are, not for what they believe. Like, that is the stuff that life is made of. But just, I love the way you were just so tender to little Mike. Like, just, you're going to be good. Encouraging them. You can't keep somebody from going down a road, but you can definitely give them hope and love along the way. And so if you're listening and there's somebody in your life, maybe it's you, who's like, "Ugh, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I don't know what to, I feel like I am gay, but I don't know what to do with this. My family might be upset." You're right. They probably might be, especially if they're religious. And that's stuff you need to deal with. So I think, what Mike is offering, as far as help and guidance and coaching, and I'm sure he knows lots of therapists that are, working with kids or people who are coming to this realization, like, reach out for help. It's so much easier now to find that help than it ever was. People are coming out.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you came out of a closet, but I did too, in a different way. Mine was like, I no longer believe the way I used to, and here's how I see things now. And that is a very hard closet to come out of too. But you literally came out of two of them. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even imagine adding another layer of, just becoming. I can't even imagine that. So good job, Mike.
Thank you.
Way to work on yourself. Way to not give up on Mike.
Thanks. Yeah. I'd already invested so much energy and work into it already, right? It's like, no, let's do one that like brings life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
If people want to find you, Mike, where do they find you?
Listen, the most fun place to find me is probably Instagram. I'm the most active and prolific there. But like I mentioned earlier, I have a Substack where I publish new episodes of my memoir right now, and I'm in the throes of becoming who I'm going to be at Bethel. Like, it's all those things are coming into place in the story right now. But I'm on YouTube. I've got a podcast. And my website, MikeMaeshiro.com, has all the stuff that I'm doing and offering public. Those are all great places to find me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put all these links in the show notes, guys, because you may not be able to spell his last name.
Fair.
The Japanese last name.
Yeah,
so, Mike, you have been such a delight. I knew you would. Thank you so much. I honor your journey. You have worked so hard to get to where you are. And I hope that you're just enjoying that freedom and that joy and that just, what is the word? I don't even know if I can find it. Like, that relief that the things that you hoped weren't true probably aren't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yes, absolutely. I am. And Leslie, thank you so much for being such a gracious host. And you just like held space for me. You made me cry a couple times because, oh God, I feel very safe and like heard here.
I'm so glad.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting.
I'm so glad. You were an amazing guest.